Hello and welcome to week 7. So we only have one more week to go before we are done with this course, and it's always amazing to me how quickly the time flies. So we have covered a lot of material so far, and so you will be happy to know that this is the last week where you will actually have 2 chapters that you're reading. Next week, in our final week, there's only 1 chapter. So you have almost made it to the finish line, but you're definitely made it to the last week where we have multiple chapters to cover. So I am enjoying reading your annotated bibliographies, and there are so many of the resources that I'm bookmarking or looking up on my own because it's such a great way to keep a collection of such a wide and varied topic. So hopefully you were able to at least choose one of those areas that was really interesting to you as you are preparing to complete your research paper, which is in essence your final exam that's going to be due at the end of the course. So this week we're getting into an area that you probably are not going to see too much of because we're really starting to look at learners who have maybe multiple exceptionalities or severe that you may not see in a general education classroom. So topics such as traumatic brain injury, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, children who are deaf and blind, those are really kind of the topics that we're going to be looking at this week in chapters 13 and 14. So in this week's folder, what you're going to find is the same setup as always. But the PowerPoint for this week, I just kind of wanted to point out a few things. I do hope that you click on some of the links that I embed in these PowerPoints, simply because sometimes it's just a quick little glance at how a particular disability or exceptionality is manifested. So this week, as we're looking at low incidence, multiple severe disabilities, a few things that I do want you to take note of. The first really is the traumatic brain injury, which we're obviously seeing a lot more of, not just in children, but we're noticing it with veterans who are coming back from wars. So traumatic brain injury is definitely a hot topic right now. So it's really important to know how it is defined and what are some of the symptoms that you're going to notice. So here we have possible effects of traumatic brain injury, and you see lots of different effects that they may have. But here is an interesting kind of debate about the brain injury in athletics. And so many of us were involved in sports, or we have children who are involved in sports. And so what's really interesting in this particular link is that each state has its own laws about reporting possible brain injuries. And so when you click on this particular one, it will take you to a map of the United States, and you can actually click on each state and you can see what coaches, what parents, what teachers, athletic directors, anyone who's related or touching children who are playing sports, what the requirement is about reporting whether or not they're allowed to go back into a game if there is a suspected brain injury. It's really kind of fascinating. So I hope that you'll click on that. And at least if you're here in the state of Virginia, take a look and see, do you agree with some of the regulations that they have in place? Some of them were a little surprising to me. So traumatic brain injury is definitely something that we're seeing a lot more of. So we have, again, educational considerations. And again, I've put in some links for you. This one about children with social and emotional problems. And then we get into deaf blindness. And again, so many of these you are not going to see in a general education classroom. Now, it's very possible that you may have a student with a brain injury who is going to be re-entering the classroom, but things like deaf and blindness, you're probably not going to see. But it is important to know how it's defined. And so the link that I put here is from the Department of Education. And so this is actually kind of the definition of what would allow a student to be identified as both deaf and blind. So just a practical link for you. We have our causes again. And here we have augmentative and alternative communication, and so ways that we can communicate, especially if someone is deaf and blind. So there's a little YouTube video for you to watch there. And then we get into chapter 14, which is the physical disabilities and other health impairments. And this is where you're going to see things like muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, students who are using a prosthesis, are things that you're going to see in this particular chapter. So we have definition and classification. Again, only about 1% of the school-age population has a physical disability, which seems kind of low. Again, some more YouTube videos for you. This is a video that if you don't watch any of the other ones in this PowerPoint, please watch this one because it's talking about epilepsy and seizures. And this is something that you may encounter. And so there are important steps that you should follow if a student is having a seizure, and there are things that you should not do. And so this is just kind of a quick clip of what to do, what not to do if someone is having a seizure. Spina bifida, scoliosis. I'm sure we all remember being in PE class and we would have to touch our toes so they could figure out whether or not there was curvature of our spine. So I'm sure that brings back lots of great memories for many of us. Cystic fibrosis. This is a little video about a girl who has cystic fibrosis and desperately wanted to go see some of her favorite musical acts. So I thought it was kind of neat to see that, you know, they have the exact same wants and desires that we do. And so that basically is kind of what we're going to be covering here in these chapters. Again, you may see children who have a physical disability, you know, whether or not they are using a prosthesis, whether or not they're in wheelchairs, but some of the severe ones are ones that you may not see in the general education classroom. So for this week, what you're going to be doing for your discussion board is a case study that I hope you'll find a little bit interesting just because it is going to actually bring in a religious viewpoint. So as you read it, it's called Praying for a Miracle. And I do want you to post, there's only a few questions that you need to answer and respond to your classmates. But I think especially being here at a Christian university, sometimes I think we overlook how religion, spirituality plays into parental decisions. And so this one is just an opportunity to take that into consideration as well. So again, this week, physical, multiple, low incidence, severe disabilities and exceptionalities. So next week, in our final week, we will be looking at chapter 15, which is going to be looking at students with gifts and talents. So kind of getting the other side of the spectrum. But I think this is a really important topic to discuss because remember, exceptional learners simply means that they are on either side of what we consider normal development. And so we're going to be looking at the other side of the spectrum. Students who have been identified as gifted or talented. So next week, in our last week, chapter 15, and remember your research paper is going to be due at the end of next week. I hope that the video on the APA formatting was helpful to you, but if you have questions as you're trying to get it all put together, please don't hesitate to contact me. That is exactly what I'm here for, but I hope that the video as well as the OWL at Purdue will be helpful to you as you are constructing your research paper. So have a fantastic week, and I will see you in our final week.